let's take a look at accuracy, for instance, as a change anchor. There seems to be no record of specification for Africa, from fashion to technology to all engineering solutions. Sir, what is your take on that? What should we start doing right so that this renaissance will be a reality from the perspective of being accurate in solutioning?
I think my words on that is that you cannot fix what you don't measure. All right. And accuracy, if you say accuracy, for example, is the difference between a good idea and a scalable solution. You can have a good idea, but if you do not understand the nuances of what is required to bring it to fruition, you will continue to have a very good idea that sits on the table. How do you move it to a scalable solution? You move it to a scalable solution because you have the data and are able to understand it. So, for example, today, research, most of our, the lens through which the world sees Africa is Western. And you and I know, and everybody will know that I cannot say I know more and understand the background to how things are being done in China, for example, than a Chinese person would. So first and foremost, our research has to be led and driven by our own people, because the accuracy you talk about is not just the data itself, but it's how you interpret the data and how do you connect the dots. You have 3 sets of data that say different things. If you take each one in isolation, you don't get the full picture, and then you will never be able to get a solution. And I can give you an example. A couple of years ago, there was a company called Bharti Airtel that tried to come into Africa. They were very successful in India. And the founder thought, okay, roughly speaking, Africa is the same size of India in terms of land mass, particularly in terms of population. And they were able to, come up with a strategy and grow very, very quickly. And they thought they could come to Africa and exactly do the same thing. But then Africa is how many? 54, 55 countries with different backgrounds, different, way of doing things. And when they got here, they found out each country has its own uniqueness that makes it difficult to call the market homogeneous. So because of that, they had to rejig the way they look at it. Why? Because they looked at data which says Africa is 1.4 billion. Is it accurate? Yes, it is accurate. But does it tell you the full picture? No. And because it did not, the strategy flopped. It took them some adjustments for them to come back and continue that journey. So that is an example. The truth is, whether it's census today, you don't have data that tells you, with clarity that this is the census of people of this age, of that age, of that age. You don't have records in the hospitals.
The demographic.
You have a lot of stuff. So that to me is where you talk about accuracy. Nobody is going to give us that accuracy. We have to do it ourselves, and we have to hold ourselves accountable to make sure that these details are there, and we're able to build a scalable solution to our unique problems on the basis of empirical data.
We often hear local content here, local content there, so. But in terms of homegrown, so what do you think as a change anchor, right? How do we employ homegrown approach, right, for African Renaissance to come faster?
I think in terms of homegrown, what is important for me really is the realization that Africa can only be developed in its own unique way by Africans. And I mentioned the example of our boss and our mentor, Alhaji Aliko Dangote, who has taken that idea and has invested everything he has in Nigeria or in Africa, because he believed that nobody will build your home for you. And it's true. An example which sounds very, very obvious is that if my roof is leaking and my neighbor's roof is leaking, chances are I'm going to try to find a way to stop mine from leaking before I help somebody else. So therefore, I mean, there is no real, question, if you like, about what that focus should look like. And I think it's to understand that we have to create an Afrocentric innovation that may be going against the grain of copying and pasting what the Western world is using. So, for example, if you take the side of technology, a lot of things that are written in different languages, for example, or have taken into consideration different ways of doing things. You find that even a banker is a banker, for example, but moving from Europe to America, you find different practices. So our soil structure is different, which is why you don't just buy fertilizer, bring it, and expect that things are going to work. So an example is the M-Pesa solution in terms of places that lack a bank. If you look at what is happening on the technology side in Nairobi, if you like, it's called the Silicon Savannah these days, what is happening in Lagos, what is happening in Cape Town, and all that drive towards innovation. It's because the people who are driving these solutions understand the nuances, the peculiarities of the geography they're working for. So a homegrown solution is indeed the best way for me to go forward. And that does not mean one will not collaborate with other people. That doesn't mean we will not learn one or two things from other regions. No, it simply means that we have a peculiar situation and we therefore need to look at how to move ourselves out of that, knowing what we know, and then trying to lean on getting external help where it's required. So by any stretch of imagination, this is not saying that we don't need help. No, it's just saying that we have to understand the context that we're dealing with and then bring a solution that is fit for purpose.
So, to help African Renaissance, what is your take again on collaboration as a change anchor?
So, well, I mean, the goal saying is that if you want to go far, go together. If you want to go fast, go alone. I think for me, really, there is no real, I mean, there's nothing more than that. What Africa needs as far as collaboration is concerned is actually to have, if you like, a regional or continental synergy. Today, you find different parts of Africa have strengths in certain areas, whether it's agriculture, or it's banking, or it's technology, or it's human resources. Different parts of Africa have their own peculiar, as countries, have their own strengths and weaknesses. It doesn't make sense, for example, today that we buy ties from China. We are 1.4 billion people, 54 or 56 countries. Why can't we say, okay, which regions in Africa have the rubber? Which regions can produce all the ties that we need? Which regions can produce all the rice that we need? Which regions can produce, for example, if going with the example of car, beyond tires, you also need glasses. Why can't we make an African car, even if it means that vehicle is going to have parts from different countries in
across Africa?
A lot of people don't know this. For one vehicle to get off the assembly line in the US, it goes across the border between US and Canada 66 times, more or less. People don't know this. So there are a lot of things that Canada is strong on, and there are a lot of things that the US is strong on. And then, of course, US is the bigger market. But we don't have that in Africa. If you go and take a census of all the cars we drive in Africa, what percentage is brand new cars? Very, very small, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So what that means is all the parts that these vehicles are going to need, why can't we give that to ourselves? Why can't we, kind of regionalize, or if you like, localize our own requirements? Forget about exporting stuff to the rest of the world. We're talking about feeding ourselves. We're talking about clothing ourselves. We're talking about putting a roof over our heads ourselves and making sure that things are going well. And for that to happen, the first rule for me, the first thing to break is actually the trust issue. We have a lot of trust issue between one neighbor to the next. We have different people following different systems. You also have all sorts of processes and systems that make it very difficult to do business from one African country to another. I think the AFCFTA has done a great job in trying to deal with some of those issues. For example, if I want to go to Kenya today, there are chances I may not get a direct flight to go to Kenya. I may have to go to probably Europe to come back to Kenya. I'm in Nigeria. I'm going east. What am I going to the west? So there are a lot of things around that I think a system that ensures each country is putting its best foot forward, and we are kind of synergizing as a continent. We have a continental synergy whereby people, every country is focusing on what the best value it can add to this region. Another thing I think that has happened with the Afrexim PABSS, the Pan-African Bank Settlement System. Before now, it's difficult for you to even move funds around. We have different currencies, and there are all sorts of exposures in terms of Forex that has made it very, very difficult. So you find that even though Nigeria is next door to Benin, for example, rather than dealing with our own currency, if you like, if you call it African Union, whatever it is we want to call it, but you find out that I have to change that money to CFA. And they have to change to Naira through USD or through Euro. And I think those are some of the things that need to really, really calm down if we are talking about collaboration. We need to stop seeing ourselves as competitors. We are not. We are brothers and sisters. We're neighbors, and we need to really get that put our strength as a continent and as countries forward, and that way it gives us a better bargaining power. We're able to say, okay, put our industrial hub in Nigeria, put our automobile hub in South Africa, put our tech hub in Nairobi and stuff like that.